Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Tuesday, March 20th, 2018 gathering and meeting of the Urban Village Development Commission. Feels like forever since we've been here. I know it has been for me, so I apologize for missing the last couple of meetings at the end of the year last year. But I'd like to go ahead and call this meeting to order. I see on here we have commission membership. Was there something you wanted to talk about there?
No, they just always put it on
Okay.
as part of the agenda.
Okay, well, we have commission membership. So there you go. First order of business then is to move to the approval of the minutes from the two meetings, December 6, 2016 and September, that should say 17, I believe, right?
No, the December
sorry.
is 16. They
It is. Oh,
discovered
that long
that there
ago.
was
Holy
one that had not
smokes.
been approved.
Yeah.
And September 19, 2017. Okay. I read through them. I wasn't at either of those meetings, but I don't have any comments on them. I don't know if any of you have any comments on them. Can we approve them together, or do we need to do them separately?
Let's do them separately.
Do them separately, okay. Are there any comments on the 2016, December 6, 2016 minutes? I know some of you weren't even here, right?
I wasn't remember that far back.
I don't recall being,
Don't recall.
I guess the question would be why so long ago?
I don't know what happened. The staff for the commissions, when I said, are there minutes that need to be approved, she identified these two. So it seemed like there was an error in not having brought the December ones forward, and I don't know how
Okay.
that happened.
Okay.
Well, there's nothing in there for me to comment on, so.
And I wasn't on the commission at the
Right,
time, so.
okay.
I mean, I read through and I didn't see anything that seemed out of sorts, so.
Okay, so do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
Yes.
And a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye. Okay, unanimous. And September 19th, 2017 minutes, do we have a motion on the table or any comments?
I don't have a comment.
I didn't see anything.
Okay, a motion? Okay, Scott, second?
Second?
All right, Jim, thank you. All in favor?
Yep.
Okay, unanimously approved again. All right, so now we're going to move on to the meat of the night, and that's the agenda item, public hearing Westridge North Single Family Plat, the Honorable Lucy Sloman.
Hi, Lucy Sloman, Land Development Manager for Development Services Department. A couple of things I wanted to point out. One is that if you're here to speak, please sign in on the sheet. If you just want to listen and be kept in touch, put your email on the list, and that way we will make you a party of record, and you'll get updates and materials as we go through this. There's a box to check if you want to speak or not. So tonight we're doing this slightly differently. This is going to be a two-part hearing. We always have the two parts, but we're making both of them part of the public hearing. So at the end of the evening, we'll just need to say that we're continuing the public hearing. In general, the process, since we have some new members and we did not do any permits, maybe not last year, this evening we will give the applicant and staff will give you an introduction. We will take your questions. We will hear from the public. We will go away and take all that information and provide responses to the topics that were raised in a briefing response memo. And then we'll send that out just like the staff report and have a second meeting at which you will be asked to make a recommendation to the council. The council are the decision makers. So I'm just going to run through this because this is what's called a quasi-judicial permit, and so I just want to help give you a little frame for what we're doing tonight. So a preliminary plat is a subdivision of land with more than 4 lots. A short plat can be done administratively. What is sometimes called a long plat or a preliminary plat has to be done in this kind of public forum. You'll make a recommendation to council. So the purpose is a planning level review. The various land use actions that come before you are site development permits, which are also called SDPs, and preliminary plat. We're looking for compliance with the development agreement, relevant codes, and the comprehensive plan. It is not a review of technical studies and documents. You're always welcome to ask about them, and we'll help guide you through that. Also, because Issaquah Highlands has an architectural review committee, you are not reviewing architecture, architectural styles, materials, and colors. That's done separately, but the executive director of the IHCA, Sarah Hoy, is here tonight, which is always nice because it means she hears any comments or relevant pieces that might affect the decisions and thoughts of the ARC. So quasi-judicial, like a court, proceedings are expected to be fair and both be fair and appear fair. That's done through procedural due process and substantive due process. And I'm tongue-twisting tonight. So procedural due process means the process that we use it. We give out notice. We make sure that you understand the steps and roles and responsibilities. Substantive due process means it's about the substance of the permit, and your recommendations and decisions have to be based on adopted regulations. So what I'd like you to do is to read through this series of questions, and then I'll ask if you have yes or no answers. So how many people say no to all of them? Okay. How many people say yes to some of them? Okay. Could you speak to that?
Am I the only one? Sorry.
No, you and Scott.
Oh, okay. Yes, to the second to last one, I'm a resident of Issaquah Highlands, been there for 20 years now, and we have 5 family homes in Issaquah Highlands, but none of them are at the subject property area and have no bearing on, us at all.
Okay. Scott?
I am also a resident of the Issaquah Highlands. However, I do not have any direct proximity to this plat in question.
Okay, super. So the second part has to do with ex parte contacts. That means discussions, communications outside of a public forum. The part of being a quasi-judicial matter means that all of the decision-making is done on the record in a public setting. So have there been any ex parte communications regarding this permit? Okay. And then I would ask the audience, does anyone care to challenge any of the members of the commission? Okay, thank you. And the last piece is just to talk a little bit about the difference between preliminary plats and site development permits. Both of them will be coming forward over the course of this year. And so I just want to help clarify some of the distinctions. A preliminary plat is for the subdivision of land and making sure that the lots, parcels, and tracts are appropriately sized, scaled for the uses, that the appropriate uses are being identified. We don't really review the uses except to make sure that if a tract or a parcel or a lot is being identified, that it is an appropriate size and shape for the use that's being identified. And then, of course, for code compliance. A site development permit is much more detailed. You're actually reviewing the design, again, at a planning level. So you would not only be reviewing how they have developed the parcels and tracts, but is roadway design, parks, plazas, et cetera, done in conformance with codes. And some of those codes are prescriptive, where they tell you this must be 5. Other times they are performance standards. It has to perform a certain way, such as being pedestrian friendly. That's probably your most important role because that is a more subjective decision, and so we're looking for a community input on that. Usually we can tell if something is 5. That was a joke. Okay, so public hearing on the Westridge North preliminary plat, PP 17-00004. So let me get you oriented to begin with. The subject property is here. Then around that, there is Shelter Holdings owns this kind of reverse L. The neighborhood to the west is called West Highlands Park. All the areas sort of in between that, including the subject property, are called Westridge properties. They're all owned by Polygon, including Westridge South, which you reviewed a couple of years ago. Swedish Hospital, which has a separate development agreement, is down here. They own about 27 acres. Grand Ridge Plaza is up here. Park and Ride, and then along the western edge of the subject property and Westridge properties is the Lakeside Gravel Pit, and they have a separate development agreement, which if you've read, hopefully you did read the staff report, there comes into play in some of the things that we're reviewing this evening. And by the way, feel free to interrupt me with questions as we go along. You don't have to wait till the end. So I took some pictures and had some pictures in the immediate area. I think some of the things to point out is along this western edge is High Street. These are this lower right and lower left photos are of High Street, both one looking west and one looking south. This is approximately from where Ellis Drive is now, looking out to the property. You can see that there are really amazing views all the way around, looking at all the pictures. And then just to give a sense of the gravel pit, there was this Google Street View, and up here is approximately where the Plat would be. The Plat's almost 9 acres, 73 single-family lots, and 8 tracks. The tracks serve a number of different purposes. There are 2 recreation tracks, one at the north and one at the south. There are several east-west trail connections, which also are in separate tracks. There are little pieces down here at the south end. This one is in a separate tract. This one is not in a labeled tract, so that was one of the conditions, saying that that small area either needed to be incorporated into the adjacent lot or given a tract name and size as part of the final plat. As you have read, High Street is being proposed for conversion to a multi-use trail with recreational facilities and an overlook along it. The neighborhood is identified as a house and garden neighborhood type, which helps orient you towards the design guidelines that apply. At this point, we're only looking at, say, things like circulation and lot configuration being impacted by house and garden. It will also be guiding us with landscape design review in the future. And then on the ARC, the Architectural Review Committee side, this also results in a specific set of architectural standards that are applied to the project. Where Lakeside is on the west, it tends to drop off. You can sort of see where the steep slope that was identified with a previous plat is. This darker gray area is where it is steeper. These sort of tan areas is where it is flatter. The street system. The proposed street system is Street A, which is parallel to High Street. There are several streets that are being proposed to connect into the plat. High Street would. Federal is being extended to connect into the Plat with the Plat building a stub. And also Ellis has been extended through another project to the south. And then this southern portion is what remains of High Street as a vehicular road. Part of the reason that remains is in the Lakeside Development Agreement, there is Neighborhood F. And this is a snippet from the circulation plan, which assumed that there would, or identified, not assumed, identified that there would be a circulation connection at approximately this location. While there are streets within this plat, it is not proposed that, or not this plat, this neighborhood of Lakeside, it would not, the roads inside of it would not connect to other parcels within Lakeside. So it would be a cul-de-sac or some kind of very limited roadway system. The main street is proposed to have parking on both sides, and staff have identified that some kind of circulation facility is needed here, and we, after talking with the applicant, have proposed a VUNERF. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. There's certainly been a lot of discussion about this change of making High Street into a shared use or a multi-use trail. And so I think it's important to look at the bigger context to sort of set the framework for why the city was willing to support this proposal. Currently, High Street is the northern connection into West Highlands Park. Discovery Drive is the southern connection. As Westridge and the Shelter Holdings properties build out, there will be a significantly more complete network. And specifically in relationship to this plat, as I mentioned, there will be Street A, which parallels High Street and replaces that connection, and Ellis Drive is being extended. So while we have one northern street right now, after construction, there will be two streets into that, as well as the ped bike corridor that's shown in yellow and would be not include vehicles any longer. So what is a VUNERF? A VUNERF is a Dutch term for a shared pedestrian vehicular corridor. We have a lot of them in Issaquah Highlands, Tallis, all through our urban villages. In looking at the grades, the street connections, the existing street grid, we had initially spoken with Polygon and considered not having this street connection. However, as we began to see the final grades as part of the plat, we felt that, you know, one of the premises of Issaquah Highlands is an interconnected street grid network, and that we don't use dead-end streets unless there's some reason that we can't bring the street through. That might be topography, it might be the edge of the project, it might be a critical area, but that wasn't the case with any of these. And so we worked with them to identify this, and you can see here is where Park Drive would have dead-ended without that. To give you a sense of what this VUNERF might look like, I identified Heron Lane, which is kind of the connection, the continuation of the road that comes out of Central Park on the east side. It is a VUNERF as well. However, it is only 18 feet from this edge to this edge. We're proposing 20 feet. And you can see on one side, it has a sort of similar shallow landscape area. The one difference is that Heron Lane is about 240 feet long, while this VUNERF is that we're proposing would be 80 to 100 feet long, so somewhere in the third to half as long. Road grades, we've gotten some questions from the public about road grades. So the existing exit right now is about 7.5%. The proposed connections heading east, Ellis Drive would be approximately 10%. Federal would be approximately 8.5%. Street A is fairly flat in the 1 to 2% in the middle and 5% at the north end. And just for reference, the maximum road grade that the city allows is 12%. So all the roads are comfortably under the allowable maximum grade. Parking. The first thing I have to say is parking is not part of a plat review. However, I know you, and I know you will ask about parking. So the applicant I didn't even have to ask. They included this as part of their package, and which was very helpful because it allowed us to really understand how this might be laid out. On the other hand, I do want to say that this is a concept. They have not designed the houses. They are setting the lot widths, and we do have some conditions around driveway widths. So you can make certain assumptions about how much parking might be on lot, how much parking might be on street. But this will be finalized through the construction permit review process. I think there are two main things to point out. One is that if they provided the 2 garage parking stalls that they have shown, that meets code. That is all they're required to provide. They, in addition to the 2 garage parking stalls, are proposing 2 parking stalls on the driveway, on the garage apron or the driveway. They are also proposing on-street parking. Now, they used a rather tight standard for the diagram that they provided, which is consistent with how long a parking stall in a parking lot would be. However, we know that there are a variety of car lengths, that there are the need for, as people come out of their driveways, to be able to see oncoming traffic, to keep people from impinging so tightly that it is difficult to maneuver. And so one of the conditions that we have put or proposed for the plat is that right now most of the driveways that in this concept is shown they have the driveway on the same side of the lot. So that's what I'm calling unpaired driveways. And while you end up with just enough curb length, we're concerned that that won't have the sight lines and just good functionality where we're not having to do enforcement actions all the time. So when we see the final plan, if we feel that there is not enough regular length, then we may require them to pair the driveways. In other words, put them on either side of a property line, and then the next lots would be like this, and then the next lots would be like that, so that you end up with a longer curb length. We can also do that in conjunction with fire hydrant placement, street trees, water meters, all those street lights, all those things that are in the planting strip, and be able to really prepare a coordinated plan to look at how all these pieces come together to create the community, to provide the basic equipment that's needed, while also providing as much on-street parking as we can get, while noting they, again, are significantly over the required parking.
Lucy?
Yes, sir.
So what's the width of this street compared to the street that it would be replacing to the west of it?
It's wider.
It's wider. What
so-
about if you took out the parking spaces?
Okay.
I know they're proposed, but I'm just trying to, because obviously this street is not just going to get the street traffic from the homes that are on it, but also the additional traffic from the street to the west that it's replacing.
Sure. So let me take a minute and walk you through that. The High Street is, I believe, 2 9-foot lanes and 2 5-foot bike lanes. So that would be 28 feet. And I believe this one is 34 feet, so it's 2 10-foot lanes and then 7-foot parking on either side. And I would be hesitant to remove the on-street parking. I believe that it's an important part of meeting the overall sort of neighborhood need for parking. I had a resident of West Highlands Park come in and speak to me after Polygon's meeting with the community, and talked to them about some of the parking challenges West Highlands Park is facing versus how some of these other neighborhoods are designed. And I do think that getting on-street parking is an important part of accommodating the fluctuation of parking needs in a neighborhood.
Right, but also sight lines become more difficult when you've got the added traffic. Isn't that correct? I mean, you were mentioning sight lines can be difficult. You've got to think
It's
about
not
additional
about traffic. That would be about cars parked too closely to the driveway, not just the on-street parking.
But it's the sight lines from the driveways out to that road.
Right.
Yeah, I
I
think
mean,
you guys
this
are saying the
is,
same thing.
this is an
Yeah.
approved standard
Okay.
that they have selected, which has on-street parking. Again, the development agreement expects that there would be on-street parking. That's strongly encouraged. So let us take a look at the concerns that you're raising and maybe dig in a little deeper to how this might lay out. I understand you want to say something. And we'll include that as part of the briefing response
you.
memo. Yes, Jeff?
So just to clear the cobwebs from my head, because it's been so long, so I'm going to back up. You said if they just went with the 2 garage parking spaces per house, they would have met the parking need. So that seems to refer to the number of available parking, but it doesn't address things like, and I know that they've gone further than this, so I appreciate that, first of all. I just want to, this is really for me to understand. It would address the number of parking stalls, but it wouldn't address, guest parking, delivery trucks, or, anything where, like, you're not expecting random people to park in your garage, right? Assuming you have your cars there, right? I mean, you just can't double them up. So is it, in fact, true that no on-street parking would be required on this at all?
It would not be required, but I would have to think, it's a good question. I'm not sure that there are any street standards that don't have on-street parking, because we consider that an essential part, not only for a functional reason, but from a pedestrian-friendly reason. On-street parking slows the cars down that are driving on the street, creates an additional buffer for pedestrians walking on the sidewalk. And so we consider that just part of, I think that's why it shows up in all the standards.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that they've gone to that length, but it's just curious to me that.
Oh,
that we would-
and let me say one more thing, Jeff, which you said. And you will probably remember this because we always say this. Guest parking is embedded in the minimum required. But I think we've seen that in neighborhoods, if you have a party, even if you have the 2 guest parking stalls, it's unlikely that your neighbors are going to let you use their garages to accommodate guests.
It's unlikely you'll let your guests use your garage. I mean, we're talking about garages, not driveway space. Yeah, no, I just find it fascinating and interesting still that we would count those stalls and not consider something, because if I'm nothing, I'm practical, right? I mean, who here has loaned their parking garage space to anybody else ever, right? Other than your child coming home from college or something. Like, I don't believe I've ever parked my car in anyone else's garage for any reason. So I just find that fascinating and interesting, but I'm glad you've gone further.
So we'll package together a response on parking and street design.
Lucy,
Oh, yes.
just educate me. When you said enforcement actions, what were you referring to?
We have some other parts of town where the curb lengths are fairly short, and we get a lot of complaints from neighbors of people kind of being very close to their driveways and making it hard for people to get in and out. And so that's part of the reason that we talked about the paired driveways, so that we would have enough curb length where people can both park on the street and be able to see and maneuver in and out of their driveways.
I'm going to bring something else up real quick, and this is nothing we can fix, but it's just something I want to make you aware of if you're not already. But there's been a lot of discussion, and I did a walk around recently with the city engineer and a couple
Right.
other residents. There are a lot of people who tend to park, and it will happen on this street, where they will park in front of their house or on the street facing the opposite direction, which in and of itself doesn't seem like a big deal. But if you park in the opposite direction and then you pull into traffic, it's a very dangerous situation, especially if somebody's not expecting someone to come from that other direction. So, again, we can't fix it here, but I like to bring it up because it's something I've talked to the police department about, I've talked to the engineer about, but I would just ask that if there's anything that can be done, whether it's through signage or just how things are oriented, that we discourage that sort of behavior because it can be extremely dangerous, if not annoying.
So one step further, this is parking. Is there planned discussion around the roadway itself through here? I know we've touched on it. So where I'm going is traffic calming in light of the length of this roadway.
Sure.
And the second comment or question that I would raise is specific to plans around crosswalks. Is there a design?
And bulb outs, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Bulb outs.
so bulb outs are the most common form of traffic calming that we use, not only because they make the road feel narrower, sometimes we can plant larger trees in them just to make the road feel narrow. That narrowness inherently calms traffic. The other thing, not having a long straight street is part of that. Another reason that curb bulbs are good is that we can use them to keep people from parking in places they shouldn't. So we want to make sure that, for instance, there's a curb bulb in front of hydrants. We like to put them near the intersection so that people don't park too close to the intersection. At the same time, we have to evaluate them relative to fire trucks and school buses and things to make sure that they will be able to get their turning radius and be able to maneuver in and out of the street.
And in front of the crosswalks or the pedestrian pathways.
Yes. So, and to speak to both of your questions, on a street such as this, we do not, the city does not typically stripe crosswalks. They limit that to arterials. There are a number of reasons why. However, because we do have these kind of mid-block crossings or where there is a trail crossing, we do have we want to, the standard that we have proposed is in the street standards. It's a stamped concrete, then with that sort of reflective stripe on either side to highlight that there is a pedestrian crossing. And Jeff is absolutely right. We would want the curb bulbs so that a pedestrian preparing to cross the street and a driver will have better sight lines to each other.
Great.
Thanks.
Yeah. So the pedestrian network, so there, the main pedestrian network are the sidewalks on either side of the street. There is also a series of trails associated with the Plat. Of course, one of those is High Street, which would be a multi-use trail for both pedestrians and bicyclists. There are east-west trails that are proposed to break down the block size. I have a diagram about that in a moment, but you can see that these are provided to help the streets connect through. You know, this area was originally laid out with Microsoft in anticipation of a second campus, which in the end did not happen. So we have these super blocks, which was part of sort of their approach to laying out the area. And what we've been doing is working with applicants to create a finer-grained, interconnected street network, and where we don't have enough streets to add in trails, sort of a through-block passage. And so this southern trail is a good example of that. This is a townhouse parcel that the permit will be coming to you in the near future. And they have proposed a neighborhood trail that would connect into that and continue on through the townhouse project. We have proposed some fine-tuning to this network because it's important that as someone is walking, they have good sight lines to sort of see where they're going. These two tracks that form this route don't line up exactly. So in the staff report, we proposed a couple of different ways to do it. One would be to adjust the tracks. The other is to sort of angle the trail through the tracks, allowing the buffer to get a little smaller on one side, but providing the full buffer overall within the tract. so that it has better continuity as someone's walking through it, so they have a clearer picture.
Yeah, I've been looking at that on the report, and maybe when the applicant comes up to talk about this, they can address this, but I was just curious, it looks like, without knowing exactly the size of these lots, that they aren't all the same. So
That the lots aren't all the same?
the lot sizes don't seem to be all the same width. I may be wrong about that. It's just visually, that's what it looks like to me.
Well, you're right, and I will have a slide later on. Certainly, the lots that are where they have the side exposed, either by a street or a trail, almost all of those are wider so that they accommodate a porch or a bay window or some kind of more complete architectural character. That's not reviewed by us, it's reviewed by the ARC. But part of the guidelines talk about having that on those sides of the building, so we want to make sure that the lots are big enough to do that. We also have some pie-shaped lots and some lots that are kind of stacked along because it's kind of a lazy S, you end up with some variety of lots, which is consistent with the house and garden neighborhood type.
Right, no, and I appreciate all of that. And I think what I was thinking on that is, and this is what the applicant can probably address, is how difficult is it to adjust, maybe swap different lot sizes, number 27 with number 35, so that those crossings match up, as opposed to trying to do an angle or trying to sort of wedge it in somehow. I'm just curious why that wasn't, put together in the first place. And I'm sure there's a reason. I'd just like to understand that.
Yeah, and that would be a good question for them.
Thank you.
They're forewarned.
Yep.
I think one of the other things that's important to look at is the overall pedestrian and to some extent bike network that's proposed between 9th Avenue and 6th Avenue, because in making High Street this multi-use corridor, I think it shows that we're really kind of completing a network. We had originally required of Microsoft that they provide this trail along this edge, and when they went away, we still were building out other parts of it and waiting to see what would happen in this area. So when this was proposed by the applicant, it seemed like a great opportunity to us to complete that network so that we have a variety of kinds of pedestrian and bicycle facilities. Some people, especially commuting bicyclists, are most comfortable riding in the street, taking a lane. Recreational cyclists, people cycling with children, are not necessarily going to be comfortable in those circumstances. Some people are interested in a more, a certain length ride or a certain character of the ride. Some people want to walk or bike in very direct routes. And so we're really trying to provide for a variety of different pathways. I think, what you can see is that what we're anticipating, we don't have all these pieces in place yet, but from our discussions so far, we see that we would be able to have this as a segregated corridor. There are a variety of different kinds of trail facilities on different kinds of streets, depending on the user again, and then again, a segregated trail that takes you down to the valley floor. Block length, we always talk about that with you guys. I think that we have gotten a really good length. We do have kind of a longer length right here, but we felt that between the streets and the trail corridors that are proposed, that overall we're getting a good network set up. Parks and trails, that's a huge part of this application. I've kind of thrown everything on here. If in the staff report, you may have noticed, and I said this at the beginning, that what we're doing right now is to make sure that we are creating the right size and number of recreational facilities to serve this plat. This plat doesn't exist in isolation. Both of the townhouse projects that Polygon is proposing will have large-ish parks in both of them. But we see each neighborhood contributing something hopefully unique to the overall neighborhood to provide a full range of recreational facilities. In this case, there is a small park that's right here at the north. There is a kind of linear park at the south. One of the important things that this park provides is that this is about the point at which we go from trail to road, and so trail users would come onto this facility and have a segregated bike ped facility to continue on to the south. The center portion of the High Street corridor really proposes a lot of facilities to really create a pretty significant space in this neighborhood. There's quite a bit of square footage between the trail and the houses. They have proposed to develop about a third to a half of it with different kinds of recreational uses. I want to say that the Issaquah Highlands Community Association has not weighed in on what is proposed here. If they are the maintaining entity, they would have the ability to say that they are or are not comfortable with having the maintenance responsibilities. But I think what the point of this is to set an expectation for the kind of active, engaging uses that create a public realm where people can gather. The overlook over here, this area, and then the sort of corner up here both have a lot of right-of-way on the opposite side of the street. And so because the views are pretty spectacular in this area, Polygon has proposed an overlook there, which I think will be a really great amenity to give everybody an opportunity to get out to that edge and see. And then I just have dropped in the sections that they have proposed. This starts at the north up here, and these sections kind of give you a sense of the evolution of the trail all the way down to this south end where it's road and a separate trail.
Good question. So on the overlook, you'd mentioned before, it's kind of a steep slope that goes down. Is there going to be any sort of retaining wall protection, anything that would stop a child from
That's a Darwin
jumping off the
thing.
edge?
No, absolutely. We will, actually, we look, if there's a fall of just 2.5 feet within a certain distance of where pedestrians are, we're going to require fall protection. And so we would be looking at, is it a seat wall? Might someone be sitting on it? And therefore, we need a higher railing. So we would absolutely be studying that very closely. And, frankly, Lakeside is very careful because there are serious, and many of you know this from when we worked on the Lakeside Development Agreement, there are very serious and dangerous pieces of equipment, very interesting pieces of equipment, and they don't want people trying to see, to peer in, to try and climb in and check it out. And so we would likely be working with them as well to make sure that we are providing the right kind of protection, because that is part of their federal permit as well.
Thank you.
And I have a question on the overlook as well. Is it high enough that when the proposed, and we don't know what's going to go in Lakeside yet, but do you anticipate it being high enough that it won't be impacted by a Lakeside development?
That's a great question. Let me figure out where I tucked this. Oh, I know I opened it up. Oh, it's up here, sorry. I think so, Jeff, but we'll look at that a little more closely. I believe the overlook is approximate, so this is the Lakeside sort of concept plan for circulation. Please note north is to your left, so you have to rotate the whole thing. So this Plat is along in here. The overlook is around here. And though there is a trail here, I know that all of these neighborhoods are kind of cascading down the hill. So I do think that it's very likely, but we'll look at the sort of topographic and section things that we have from Lakeside and do some estimating.
Yeah, and the building height allowable on
Right,
that area.
exactly.
Okay, great, thank you.
So Lucy, can I ask a question on that? You know how we have, I don't know if it's a standard or what it is, but when it's a public-facing structure, it's got to have some appeal, I guess, is the way to put it. What happens on the back side of that, particularly down there where it's facing that other development?
Right. So there is a condition. It's our sort of standard condition. So you can look at it and see if you think it is sufficient. It's condition number 30. So it has an average building height limit. It requires articulation of those facades, and then that there not be bright colors on those sides as well. So we're trying both to make the buildings more interesting and yet not white or something where it might really show up from a distance, so that it...
And does the same standard apply to the development that's going in there, down in that pocket there, to the east?
Oh, to the lakeside,
Yeah.
in Lakeside? I don't know. I don't know whether that would be part of the, I'll have to look at the development agreement. I haven't read it in a long time. That's an interesting question. Okay, that's a good one. Hadn't thought of that. Will do. So this was the slide. This is an image from the staff report, but it is a slide that the lots with the red dots are the ones where we've required that they be slightly wider to accommodate porches. The one exception is these two lots where the VUNERF is. They may not, the lots may not be wider, but they will have additional enhancements on that, on the sides that face the VUNERF. There were a bunch of easement ones. I'm not going to read through the conditions as we have in the past. We've sort of stopped doing that. So I'm just kind of going through all the stuff, images and things that we called out in the staff report, and then you're, of course, welcome to ask me questions about any conditions. So I just wanted to explain 3 of the easement conditions, because some of them are kind of wonky. Probably the easiest one is number 3 down here, which is where Street A meets Ellis. This little tract on the end of that block, because the way the road is curving, there will be a sight distance easement over to ensure that there is a clear zone and drivers can see each other when they're at that intersection or approaching that intersection. Number 2 is when this was originally laid out, probably with Microsoft, there was an assumption that Ellis would go straight through in a straight line, but because of the topography, it was determined that to meet sort of better road grades, that the road should be curved. That gives them a little more distance to make it down through the topography. As a result, some utilities were put in where the red line is, and there is an easement through the plat. So we're requiring that before we get to final plat, that easement be abandoned. The utilities in it will be abandoned. We won't need that easement because the utilities will either be in Street A or in the relocated Ellis. But we are requiring that be vacated because you wouldn't build houses in a utility easement. Probably the wonkiest of them all I'm saving for last, which is this one. High Street has an easement. It's this sort of striped bar right here. If you look at it in plan on an actual built street, you will see that it is where the on-street parking is. So the right-of-way goes from back of sidewalk to there isn't a sidewalk on the north side, but it goes just past the curb. And so it appears that this easement is floating, but in fact, it really is the on-street parking. And you can see that here That's what that orange box, orange outlined box represents. When Port Blakely recorded that easement, there was a provision in it that up to 100 feet could be vacated. When the property to the south was developed, I have spoken with the leaseholder of that, and they are aware that this plat is happening and that they're fine following through on the vacation. It'll probably only be 50 feet. We want to make sure that it goes back as far as this hydrant because we don't want parking in front of a hydrant. But overall, this will be part of the process that we go through with the construction drawings, getting precisely the location and rewriting the legal description for recording through the final plat process. That's it.
Great. So, do you have any questions for Lucy? I like to, hear the applicant presentation, but certainly any questions you have right now, welcome to throw out there.
I don't, with this.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you, Lucy.
Yep.
And I think now we're going to invite up, let me get my notes here. Who's coming up here, David? Yes. Is that right? Okay. Welcome.
Thank you, Lucy, by the way.
Yeah.
Good evening, members of the commission and members of the public. We appreciate you guys coming out tonight. It's a lovely evening, and we're indoors, so thank you for the extra effort for being here. My name is David Avenel. I am a development project manager with Polygon Northwest. I just want to introduce a few members of my team as well here tonight. We have, you guys can just raise your hands, Nick Abdelnour. He is our Director of Land Acquisition and Entitlement. We have Richard Rawlings, who is our Manager of Architecture and Planning. And as well, we also have Gary Scharnbroy. He works for Core Design, and he's our consulting engineer on this project. So, we are very excited here to be here tonight to present this project to you. We've been working very hard with city staff, and we're here tonight to answer any additional questions you guys might have through the process. City staff and Polygon has been, together put a tremendous amount of time and thought into the design and development of this project. We've worked together over the past 2 years, and it's been a wonderful collaboration thus far, and we're looking forward to keeping the ball moving. So, so far, very, very successful endeavor. This proposal, just to give you a little bit of history from Polygon's perspective, this is our last remaining plat on this part of the Issaquah Highlands that we're calling Westridge. We believe, this project not only provides a vibrant community of, new single-family homes to the mix up there, but overall, we're providing I hope you guys can agree that it's a community asset with the conversion of High Street to the multi-purpose trail that was outlined. This will be a significant public space that will provide hopefully some excellent views down to Lake Sammamish. We envision this open space as a recreational amenity, not just to the project in front of you tonight, but also for all of the Issaquah Highlands community, and we're excited about it. We think it's a unique opportunity, and it's something that we've kind of fleshed out through the site design process, and it's an exciting endeavor. So I hope you guys can embrace that. We believe that through the collaboration efforts with the city that we've met the conditions the city's asked for, and we're here tonight to provide you any other additional questions or any answers you may have about the project. But thank you for your time. We truly appreciate you. So with that, that's what we have for you. So Richard, I know that you had some questions on the corridors and how those lined up.
Yep.
We will have something to show you next time. We have looked into that in our efforts to make sure that the sight lines work. And Richard is kind of the planning guru for us and might be able to speak to a little bit more on how we originally got to that point and where we're going. But we can certainly give you a response and show you where we landed. So,
Is there any discussion tonight on that, on the High Street corridor piece, or something you're going to show us, or?
Really nothing more than what staff has presented. I mean, at this time, we're working on the concepts for it. We've had a meeting with West Highlands Park last week to kind of go through how the circulation's working and some of the planning that's went into it thus far. It's conceptual at this point, and it's an ongoing conversation. So, I mean, it's as far as the amenities we're planning, I mean, there is an overlook park that we definitely, I don't know if we call it a park, but an overlook plaza that we plan to facilitate into the mix. There's, some recreational amenities that we just, we haven't had a great opportunity yet to dive into it with the IHCA and really get their feedback on what they want to see. But we're in the process, so it's still.
That was sort of my question, is have you reached out to IHCA? Have you reached out to other residents? Because you had mentioned, and I would agree, that if that becomes a reality, it's not just for Westridge or West Highlands Park.
Mm-hmm.
I walk that corridor all the time with my wife and my dog. And I'm just wondering if there's any public input. I know that we've seen some things via letters for ideas, whether it be a off-leash dog park or something else. I saw that there's maybe a skate park conceptually proposed.
Sure.
I don't know where that came from. It seems awful close to the houses for me. Are there lights? Is there a curfew or a time then that when that would be closed? I mean, there's all kinds of questions I have around that, so I'm not feeling terribly comfortable right now. Just with what I've seen, I think it's a really cool and clever idea. I just would like to hear and see more detail and understand the process.
Okay.
Everyone shaking their head, yes. So are we going to hear more about it today, next meeting, or?
So I think, as I said at the beginning, this is predominantly about getting the pieces of property sized correctly. I'm sure Sarah has some strong thoughts about what is, she would be comfortable owning and maintaining. I think it's really, I will say that it is always helpful for us to hear the thoughts of the commissioners, because that guides what how we work with applicants and with the IHCA. And we can certainly bring more materials to have that kind of discussion next time if you want to understand that better.
I would definitely like to understand it better. I don't know, I don't have an opinion right now one way or the other, because I don't know enough. But I know that if I don't know any more after the next meeting, it would be very difficult for me to make a recommendation to the city council. You know me, I'm quite certain everybody's met the letter of the law and, the spirit of the agreement and everything, but that doesn't mean that I agree or understand what is proposed and how we got there, right? On some of that other stuff, the stuff that is less defined, if you will, or required,
Yeah, and I'd second that, Lucy, in that I feel like at this point, we're almost being asked to, and I don't know what's coming in the next meeting, but to recommend something that it just has so many kind of loose ends and not knowns.
Well, and here's what so let me put something out there for you to ponder and give me some feedback, so that when we go back to work on this, we're hopefully coming back with something you're comfortable with. The plat itself would not specify this is a dog park and not a skate park. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, I think what you're trying to identify, what I'm at least initially hearing that you're trying to identify, is that there seem like certain uses that, given the shape of it, the proximity to homes, seem appropriate or not appropriate. So if that is part of your concern, I understand that, and I think we could work on a sort of performance standard type of condition. And so if that's what you're looking for, I think what we can do is work with the applicant and potentially the IHCA, come back and propose a condition that will sort of help frame in what kinds of choices seem appropriate as this continues to evolve.
Yeah, for me, that would be really helpful, but I'll step back even further a little bit and say that, if we're being asked to decide whether High Street should be converted from a road to a recreation or park area. I want to understand, like, why is this happening? Why is, could a road not be put in differently, and why are we taking that away? I'd like to understand that. And then secondly, that if we're being asked to make that decision, I want to know that something's going in there, not just a big green planting strip, right? So that's my concern, is what is that? What are we going to be, I know we're not doing anything tonight, but I want to understand, am I going to have more information next week to be able to make a decision, or a recommendation, rather, with that kind of information?
So I think I'm hearing what you're saying, and that's why we come and have these conversations and then come back to you in a month. And so that's very helpful. Thank you.
I will say that the packet we received, I think, is as complete and well put together as any I've seen in at least a few months. No, for quite a long time, honestly. So I appreciate all that, and I know you guys have put a lot of hard work into that. I also know that we've received comment from Highlands Park residents.
Right.
I also know that we're going to hear some stuff tonight, and I'm sure I'll have some thoughts on that based on both what I've read and what we'll hear tonight. But I kind of feel like it was anticlimactic. I was expecting a lot more in information tonight, is sort of how I felt. I don't know.
Yeah.
So, any other
I do
questions?
have, one other call out or question. Do we have an understanding of the distance or the buffer between the open area and the new houses or structures that will be going in?
I don't think it's been, so no buffers are required.
So where I'm going is this open area going to land right in the backyard of these new houses?
So we are not proposing that there would be no buffer between the recreational activities, and so let us look into that.
Okay, because, yeah, as a potential buyer, I would think that would be a key question that someone would raise.
Yep. I have a couple other things I identified in my notes, but before I go into them, does anybody else have anything right now? Tara? No. So Park Drive, if you could clarify for me, it says here the Plat does not propose to connect Park Drive to Street A. Is that still the case, or are we talking about connecting it?
So the conditions, the
Is to
proposed condition is to connect it. It was
Okay.
originally proposed not connected.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. That's what I thought I read, but I just wanted to be sure. And then, sorry, I made some notes on my pages here. This was related to parking. I think we answered that question. This one is superblock structures. I think we answered this one too. That's a pedestrian circulation one. All right. See, I actually did my homework, and it sounds like we've gotten through some things here. Okay. Impact of lakeside development. I asked that one too. All right. So on page 47 of 76. It's noted that the applicant is building larger parks in both north and south townhouse projects adjacent to the Plat. They'll certainly provide facilities for larger neighborhoods. Each project should also provide facilities to serve its needs. Was that handled in a condition, or is there something that we're going to hear about there?
No, and what I can do is, so two things I would say. One is they have provided the small area at the north, the linear area at the south, as well as High Street. What I would recommend is that potentially, Richard, that I pull up the graphic, not the one that I had, but one that's where it takes up the whole screen, so that he can really walk you through the amenities that they have proposed.
Great.
Because it sounds like that's a big piece that you want to hear, and I think it would be appropriate to do that before we take public testimony, so that the
Okay.
public has a good understanding.
Great, yeah, because my thought on that is I've seen all too many developments that go, oh, this will hold a small child's little mini lame playground. Let's put that there. And I want to kind of understand what's really happening there, or the ideas around it. On page 50 of 76. I believe it's condition 35. I just want to address this now. High Street conversion must be complete prior to the last two houses in the plat being finalized. I believe I read in here that it's not planning to go in phases, that it would be all done at one time. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I was just wondering if that conversion, I don't know how long the construction process is and how long that will be unavailable to people. So I'm wondering if there's any way to move that up from the last two houses to some other time period that might be more reasonable for people to participate and enjoy whatever we're building. I don't know if that's feasible with the construction timeline and in how things relate to each other. So I'm not going to, obviously dictate that. That's not up to me. But I'd like to understand if it can be moved up further.
Okay.
So we can absolutely talk about that. I think part of it for us is that either Street A or Ellis Drive has to be open to vehicular traffic before they can close High Street down.
Yeah, okay. Right.
So that, means that that High Street inherently can't be converted until later in the project. But I think we were thinking, what is the absolute latest time? And I think you're asking for it to be available sooner to homeowners, and so we can absolutely talk about that.
Right. No, and I understand, again, the sequencing is a concern, but and I'm not indicating that you guys are going to, do this, but if we wait to the last possible minute, maybe they'll just wait to the last possible minute when it could have been done earlier. So just a consideration there. I think those are all my notes. And actually, I had one more. The lakeside access part, where the road ends at High Street and goes and then comes out of Lakeside, I guess. Is it assumed or expected then that if you are in that Lakeside F plat or tract or whatever we're calling it, neighborhood?
Parcel, yeah.
Parcel, you would come out and go onto Ellis Drive?
Yes. So approximately, it would be here, and then you would go like this to exit out.
Okay, so if you're coming in, you're either going on Road A or you're going on Ellis to come into your neighborhood?
Right.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, guys, anything from any of you? No? Okay, thank you, David. Richard, are we going to take a look at that? Welcome back.
I'm thinking that they want a better.
Hi, excuse me, Richard Rawlings with Polygon Northwest. Good evening. So Jeff and other members, I think what I'm hearing is when we come back, some more detail, some more flavor, some scope and scale of the type of facilities. It's true.
Maybe just walk through. The reason I'm asking Richard rather than doing it myself is, Richard, although the design guru, as I believe how David titled you, I know he is also a landscape architect and has put a lot of thought into this, and so I just thought you might be able to describe some of the way you're thinking about this in the concepts that you've provided.
Sure, and then if you can help me in a minute get to the other slide.
Yeah.
So it's about, I want to say 1,200 lineal feet. The existing road would be cut roughly back to be 18 feet wide of a paved multi-purpose type trail. That would be on the west side. So the east side of basically the center line east would be removed. I don't recall the width of the right-of-way that the city owns, but it's 50-plus feet. So in terms of where our backyards are, there's quite a separation. I want to say, so if there's an 18-foot trail on the west line, I can't read it, but I'm going to say it's in excess of 30 feet from a backyard fence to the edge of the multi-purpose trail. And then there's also a pretty significant vertical separation. So while your backyard may be in proximity to the trail, or, linear facilities that we'd, call activity areas, there's going to be quite a bit of separation. And then, planting and ornamental type fencing and so forth. So there really is supposed to be a relationship there. This is not, back of house architecture, turn your back on the trail, no exposure. There really probably should be, the intent is there's some interaction there. There's some reason to be out in your backyard, and kids can play on the other side, and, neighbors come by and wave. And so it's not unlike the front porch scenario. It just happens to be a little bit different orientation.
Okay.
Some of the things we'd thought about were, where do the 10-year-old boys and girls go? They all have these Razor scooters, and so it's not like a skate park. It would be more like, oh, well, mom and kids went down along the trail, and they had a little turnoff where they could do some, whoop-de-doos and then get back on the trail, or some swings. Sarah said, we're just in dire need of more mommy and me swings. I learned there's a name for this toy where you can get on it, mom and kids can kind of get on facing each other. And so they're really, I hate to use the term, and you had a better one, but the old park horse, or whatever, where you had these little stations along a route. And so that's kind of the vision there. No major facility, but just opportunities to kind of, families really, to kind of just, do different things along that trail.
Thanks, I appreciate that. So when I think of the skate park, I understand what you're saying. It's not a true skate park. It might be
Yeah.
a swale of some sort, or something. The things that I think about when that comes to mind for me is, while the way you described it is probably how it will most be used, but it's also, given the number of teenagers and others in the community that tend to find their way to the top of the park and ride, to the back of the school, to other areas that are a little bit tucked away but close enough to get to, it might be, if it's a swale of some sort, are they going to go hang out there at night and sit in there and smoke or drink or whatever they're going to do? And what does that do to the residents directly behind it? If lights are required to make it safe, again, what does that do to the residents that are behind it? Those types of things are what concern me. I like the idea. I just think the proximity for something like that is challenging. And especially if there is a vertical separation and you do need lights there, and I don't know if we do, but it seems to me that they would then go directly into the sight line of the home, not knowing exactly the vertical separation, but,
Right.
So anyway, those are the types of things I think about that I hope you're
Yeah, and
considering.
I think we can maybe come back with some more descriptive, measures that kind of address that and give you a little comfort. I mean, those are all the things we are thinking about. We do think the trail is lit. Behind the hospital, as an example, there's a 12-foot multi-purpose trail between our Plat, and that trail is 2 feet from the rear yards, approximately, and it's lit, but of course there's it's shielded, and it's the bulb color flavor is appropriate for being close to a
It's at
residential
the
area.
same grade, if I recall, right?
The trail is
Am I
it's
thinking of the
anywhere
same
from
one?
2 to 4 feet lower than the
Okay.
backyards there.
All right. So anyway,
Yep.
I know those two things I just
Yep.
need a little more comfort on.
Sure.
And then I do really like the idea, though, of sort of, exercise stations, if you will, places to stop and do whatever yoga or whatever you're going to do. But you won't see me doing yoga there, unfortunately. And then, of course, I think we, street furniture, or I think we call it park furniture, street furniture, that sort of thing is great. Yeah.
Who's responsible for maintaining this, since it's a fairly big,
It's IHCA, right?
Is it gonna be
So Sarah
IHCA?
can address that if you need, but that's the thought is the IHCA would be, it's in right-of-way today, so I think it's undetermined whether the city would give up any right-of-way and put it in a tract, or whether it's an agreement between the city. That's undetermined, but the maintenance responsibility would be the IHCA.
so does that mean IHCA has final say in what this looks like, or?
So
Lot of
we work
input, I guess.
collaboratively, but certainly the IHCA has a very strong, yes, they have very strong decision ability, as well as the city, to meet, to come to agreement on what suits for the community. And Yeah.
I've learned to never underestimate the power
I mean,
of
that's
Sarah.
kind of.
No, I know.
you the-
Actually,
well,
I like that idea.
As you know, for example, I mean, all the parks that we've built, or anybody in the Highlands, I mean, they've gone through, for example, not for example, but the Architectural Review Committee. That's the purpose of that committee, is to sit down and go, okay, you know, what are we taking on as the IHCA? What are the uses, you know, security, appropriateness, all those things are sort of vetted before we get an approval to actually then go submit it to the city. So it's got to pass through IHCA before we can actually submit, say, a landscape permit or a park permit or some improvement permit, just like we do for the homes.
Well, I guess what I want to try to get at is, I don't want it to be a situation where IHCA says this is, you know, too much or not enough, and, you know, the developer says, you know, this is what I mean, how do you get around that if?
So that, that doesn't bother us. I appreciate your concern, but that's on all these processes, whether it's just strictly the preliminary plat or a park or whatever. I mean, we work together with the city and with the IHCA to, you know, to come to agreement, and we do. So, I mean, I don't expect any issues other than just what are the things we need to address, and then we go address them.
And I think what I would add is, you know, when we took a look at the plat, we said that some of the area between, they had mainly looked at the area between the trail and the homes as landscape. And we said, you know, land is too valuable, recreation is at a high demand, and this is something that we should look at. So they proposed that area, as I said, about a third to a half of that area being developed. And they put together a concept, which, you know, I sent to Sarah. She's seen it. We're all working together, so no one's surprised. And yet, sitting down and really digging into the details is part of what we do during construction. I'm not trying to say that we shouldn't be having these conversations. We absolutely should, because I think the importance of that is understanding community expectations, what kinds of things. I mean, that's why you're here, is to provide us that kind of feedback. The one thing I will say is, part of the marketing of this, it's an important part that it's clear to people who are buying houses. Your house has a green space next to it. Your house doesn't. It has a more active recreation, so that homeowners understand where they're buying. Some people like to be in the middle of things. Some people don't like to be in the middle of things. And so that's where providing different kinds of setup is important, so that people can look for and be aware of the situation they're buying into. You know, each of the, I mean, I think to provide just a little bit more information, I had zoomed in here. Let's see if I can get this to, there we go. Each of the trail routes that come through end in a sort of little plaza sitting area, and as well as these parks and at each end. They are not particularly developed right now. So I think that the kind of things that you're telling us that you think more of an exercise course or more mommy and me swings, and maybe not something that is skate oriented. I know the IHCA is not a proponent of pea patches anymore. They may, I'm curious to hear, I shouldn't say it that way, but they've had some challenges with pea patches. Dog parks, we haven't had a chance to talk about whether that's something that they have concerns about owning and maintaining or not. So we can do some of that before the next meeting to try and find some more edges for you as part of this process.
Thank you. And if you could provide some clarification as well, or speak to this, because I'm not clear on it. The park space or open space that's required for this development, is this vacated or imagined High Street part of that requirement in terms of the square footage or amount needs?
So there isn't a square footage requirement. There is, you probably remember, having been on the commission for a long time, that to provide guidance to the commissioners, we have sort of surveyed the average size of a lot of these different facilities per household, and this is certainly consistent with that. And it does take into account both the sort of more park-ish spaces at the north and the south end, as well as the facilities that are along the trail and the trail, because that is a much more significant recreational facility than we've had for trails in other places.
Okay, so which leads me to the question of, and forgive me if this is sensitive, but the road is owned by the city, correct? And is it being, for lack of a better term, given to the developer for this purpose? Or is there an agreement that's in place to purchase that space, or what's happening? How does that fit together?
So the city is not giving up right-of-way. The city will retain it as right-of-way, and it's throughout Issaquah Highlands, the IHCA maintains the right-of-way and the facilities, not the roadways, but the landscape and those kinds of things that are in the right-of-way. The city owns the right-of-way. It's a partnership. And so we see this as a really amazing opportunity to get such a significant trail and overlook in a place where we haven't had something like that. We did build, you may remember when we did the Plat for Pinecrest, we got a similar sort of trail along the edge, but it was not for bicycles.
Right.
And so, the fact of having such a long, linear, shared use facility with both recreation and overlooks was something that we thought was just an amazing opportunity.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. I know there have been a couple of public comments about that as well, so, okay. Ben, did you have something? Okay. All right, cool. Anything else from the commission at this time before we go to public comment? All right, thank you, Mr. Avenall, and thank you, Mr. Rawlings. Appreciate that. At this time, I'd like to invite anyone who hasn't signed up yet to go ahead and sign up on the sheet up here if you are planning to speak. And we ask that you keep your comments brief. When you step up, give us your name and your address, please. And if you'll forgive me, I have to take a quick bio break before I do, so I will be right back. So,
why don't we take a 5-minute break,
Okay, thank you.
and we will start again.
Everybody to their phones.
Again.
I was getting withdrawals.
Okay. I am. Just kidding. All right, if I could ask everyone to grab a seat, please. We're going to get started again. Thank you for indulging me. I appreciate that, and others. Thank you. All right, at this time, 8:27 p.m., I'd like to open up the public commentary section of the UVDC meeting tonight, and I have a few people that have signed up here. If you have not put your name on the list, once we get through everybody, I will ask again if anybody else would like to speak. So we'll start tonight with Sarah Hoy.
Good evening. Sarah Hoy. I'm the Executive Director for the Issaquah Highlands Community Association. A lot of what I've written down has already been discussed tonight, so I'm just going to do some highlights. I have been working collaboratively and jointly with the City of Issaquah and as administrator for the Architectural Control Committee for IHCA and also with Polygon to ensure that everything is done in compliance with our governing documents and our architectural standards. The ARC committee has reviewed the preliminary plat and approves the plans as it's being submitted tonight for the 73 single-family Westridge section. I will, and my architectural control committee for the custom for builders will work with Polygon to review the ASDP application process prior to them submitting to you back for approval. We're going to focus on the architectural details and the site plans, traffic concerns, pedestrian vehicular flow. As Jeff knows, I'm very involved right now in the City of Issaquah Highlands Council, IHCA, and Regency Center's joint effort to help with safety in the crosswalk, so that's a big sticking point for me. Safety. Parking is always an issue in the Highlands, so that is always on my list to look at very carefully. A lot of people are now using their garages for storage rather than parking in them, and so I do have some concerns about that, and I'd like to see the streets wider, is what you'd brought up. I also look at the building height and massing. We also require a color board for all of the exterior materials that are going to be used, from siding to roofing to paint colors. I've actually helped pick out paint for the townhome projects. I told them I don't like that color green, we should use this one. So I've been doing that. I'll look at the exterior materials. I've also worked with Polygon on helping get them the playground equipment that is certified on national standards. That's also a big, huge concern for me. We, as the IHCA, have all of our playgrounds independently inspected by a certified playground national certified inspector, and so I've made some recommendations. And so I'm also looking at this entire project, not just from this one piece, but the 72-lot single-family homes, the townhomes. Each one of them will have a park area. Each one of them is going to be interactive. At the end of the day, it's one community. So I'd like to see different age groups for some of the different play equipment that we're discussing. Obviously, longer stretches of open grass areas for moms to kick and dads to kick the balls around with their children, and a grassy lot that actually drains and is not a swamp. So I'm very aware of the ongoing issues in some of our park areas. So this is an excellent opportunity for us to do something really spectacular. We have some stuff around the pond areas. We have gravel trails. We've done mulch trails. So I'm very engaged in what type of surfacing works. And with it being the overlook area, it is an excellent opportunity. And we do have some issues sometimes with, not Forest Ridge, the Toll Brothers project, Pinecrest, kids loitering at night and things like that. So those things that I will be addressing as far as security, working with the Issaquah Police Department. Lighting can be a deterrent, and some other things that we can do to help that. So I'm very involved, as you can see in the process, and very engaged in the community. I know there's some concerns this evening. We will stay and listen to those as well, and try to work on those things on your behalf. Some of the things I can't help overcome, but most of them I can, and we can integrate that into the new part of the community. So thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Next up, Mike Zalewski. Did I get that right, Mike?
Yeah, perfect. Hello, my name is Mike Zalewski. I'm at 943 3rd Avenue Northeast in West Highlands Park. I'll be the Debbie Downer tonight. So I'd like to read you my statement here. Please reject the proposal to convert High Street to a pedestrian path as part of the Polygon Westridge North development. This proposal is nothing more than accommodating a developer at the expense of the community. We already lost a cherished, highly utilized paved pedestrian path by Swedish due to Westridge South, and now we face the loss of a highly utilized road due to the Westridge North proposal. The evolution of this Polygon proposal to convert High Street to a pedestrian thoroughfare apparently stems from an Issaquah Highlands design guide that states the following. Arterial streets lined with backyard solid fences or walls are discouraged. The explanation by Polygon is that the current neighborhood house designs along with the slope grades in that area would result in home backyards having fences or walls lining High Street. So instead of Polygon changing their designs to comply with the guideline, the proposal is to remove the road so that the guideline does not apply. This is unacceptable. These are merely guidelines, not requirements. There is no shall in these statements, so deviation should be acceptable. I really think these guidelines used as a mean to eliminate High Street so that premium prices can be demanded for the 40 or so houses with views that will line High Street. I would much rather have our road regardless of the fences or walls. There are many reasons why this proposal is just wrong. The current situation is the best use. If it's not broken, don't fix it. High Street provides access to West Highlands Park as a highly utilized road for vehicles, bike lanes for cyclists, and a sidewalk for pedestrians. As much as pedestrian bike movement is important and desired, High Street is much more used by vehicle traffic and would continue to be the best use for that purpose. I've literally walked and driven and biked and down High Street over 1,000 times, so I fully understand the nature of High Street. High Street would be an effective bypass route and maintain safety within Westridge North by eliminating West Highlands Park through traffic. The situation in the making is analogous to Falls Street up the hill, where neighbors complain about the through traffic racing through their neighborhood as an alternate route to Park Street. One of Issaquah's main concerns is safety. Eliminating a safe bypass route around a dense neighborhood doesn't appear to be in alignment with that safety initiative. We need to consider also emergency vehicle access. Forcing emergency responders through a dense neighborhood could also have an impact on safety. There's also a proposal in the works for an elementary school to be built adjacent to the Westridge South development. This will also increase traffic burden on the area. Eliminating High Street will have an effect here. Having Ellis and Discovery as the ingress-egress routes for West Highlands Park results in only steep hills, which poses a problem during snow and ice conditions. High Street, it was always an alternative route as it was not steep. This is a big concern for our residents because we have lived it winter after winter. This proposed path really goes nowhere if you think about it. It would connect one end of High Street from West Highlands Park to the other end of High Street at 9th Avenue, which it really does now already. The Lakeside Development Master Plan to the north of High Street already has a pedestrian path planned for that corridor north of High Street that will actually go somewhere, is that it'll connect 9th Avenue with Lakeside on down to the existing pedestrian path at the western perimeter of West Highlands Park and even down to the valley below. We should not change this corridor, if at all, until all future development, including Lakeside, is fully understood. If a pedestrian path is built, I don't have any confidence in the quality of the final product. In discussions with Polygon reps at their community meeting last Thursday, the response I received when asking about the actual path construction, the answers was that it would be the existing road asphalt, not new asphalt, no resurfacing, not like the Lake Sammamish Boulevard Park or path or the Swedish path. This again would be unacceptable. I'm afraid that if this proposal is approved, the project will be done as cheaply as possible because the return on investment is not in the path itself. It is in the elimination of the road by any means, being able to sell the houses at top dollar. Also, a path constructed by a developer where all future management and maintenance will become the responsibility of the city or the IHCA does not seem like the most responsible use of public funds. I'd rather see that money go to an actual maintaining a real park that benefits far more people than an odd, disjointed path to nowhere. I request that the commission not approve this proposal and keep High Street intact with bike lanes and sidewalk. The utility of this corridor is not maximized with the pedestrian-only plan. If the road, bike, pedestrian access is all maintained, it will all benefit a much larger population than just the pedestrian thoroughfare. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zalewski. Braden Hayes.
Hi, my name is Braden Hayes. I also live in West Highlands Park, and I have 2 young kids, and I just wanted to voice my my appreciation for the design of this, and also some of the concerns that I had that I was listening to the detailed plans today kind of came up to my mind. The first of which was that Mike mentioned the major thoroughfare that it is today. Today, like Mike said, it's if we're replacing it with a road that goes through 73 homes as the secondary as a thoroughfare into West Highlands Park and further south, the houses down in the lakeside development. My concern with that is that if kids are going across there and going to play, then this is a lot like, to me, the road that goes from Zeke's at the stop sign goes north 25th Avenue there. There's a lot of traffic there. There's parallel parking that there's a lot of trouble with cars passing each other. And I just see this kind of perpetuating that problem. Secondly, I think it's, Mike mentioned it a little bit as well, but the trail itself, my concern is that the buffer, as I looked at the designs, the buffer between the trail and Mr. Walker, you brought this up, the difference between the backyards and the buffer between the trail and the backyard to me is a concern. I'd love to see it, what the final design would be like, and I think it's a great idea, but I'd like to see the execution. The devil's in the details here. And the reason I say that too is that there's, today there was mention of blocking the views of the gravel pit. That's some of the requirements. I guess I'm having trouble visualizing how an overlook would look without being able to look down. It seems a little strange to me. Today there's a bunch of trees there and a berm that protects that, and I have trouble, again, seeing that further. And that's my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes. Appreciate it. Next is Bob, is it Swanson? You left the "un" off. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Bob Swanson. I live at 826 4th Avenue Northeast up in the Issaquah Highlands in the West Hills area, West Highlands area. I've been one of the longest, if not longest person living there right now. I've lived there for coming up on 10 years. And I think I have a couple of things. One is I think I might have the distinction of knowing more people around there than anybody else. I've gone and knocked on tons of doors in the entire neighborhood for a couple of different reasons. And in getting to know people, I personally haven't met one person that says, I love that idea. Wow, there we go. Let's have that street converted. And I just found out on Thursday, by the way, that it's just going to be, all they're doing is cutting it off. Nope, you can't drive down there, but there really isn't. The road's going to stay there. The sidewalk, I guess, is going to stay there. Stuff we already have. I've walked up to the bus station for years, walked down up to the movie theaters. I drive up and down that all the time, every week, up and down that street. I see families walking with their kids, pushing their strollers. I see people jogging. I see they have a bike path right now there. They are people exercise. People. I stop and we look at incredible views right there. We look at plants that are growing there. We've looked at all throughout the season, beautiful things. During the snowing, we've walked up there. It's just beautiful. There has not been a day I've walked up there and gone, you know what we should do one day is block all traffic so we can just walk up and down the street. I've never in my wildest dream ever thought that. Because you know what? We already have it. It's there. I do not want to drive through homes with more kids. I already do that in the place I'm at. I have 2 kids. They're 26 and 23. I love my kids. I love the kids in our neighborhood. One of my biggest fears is running over a child. I check around my car to make sure no kids are there. I do not want to drive my car through that neighborhood. Plain and simple. I can't say it any clearer than that. Nobody in our neighborhood wants to drive there. Okay, so I haven't found one person that is excited about that. Okay, people don't tend to come down to our neighborhood and go, hey, knock on our door and go, what do you guys think about this proposal? Nobody came down and knocked on the school, and nobody's knocked on our door about this. Now, the developers, we did have a meeting with them on Thursday, so I appreciated it. They were very nice. It's funny how not one of the developers mentioned any of our concerns, because we're very open about that. The city, I appreciate what the city mentioned, but you know what? Nobody has mentioned any of the concerns that we've had. Very interesting. I don't know why that is. Why can't people say, hey, here are the positives and negatives about it? There are positive and negatives about things. Nobody say, hey, you know what? If you build that there, you know what's going to happen during the winter? And we were very clear about this. The hill that's over here by the walkway that, what's that? Discovery. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Where you're going to be exiting, there's a little hill there. We cannot get up that hill when it snows or it ice. Let's say in a cold day and there's a little ice came down. We put out on Facebook that morning very quickly, hey guys, don't go up that hill, go up High Street. So everybody goes, hey, thanks Bob, thanks whoever, appreciate it, yeah, I forgot. So we go around. It is a dangerous hill. If you're going straight down, you literally cannot stop if you forget and you're going down that hill. It is dangerous. I grew up in Colorado. I barely made it down one time without getting into an accident the other day because I forgot. And during it snows, you can't get out. So what you're basically going to be doing here, if you build this right there, right at the bottom, right where the green hits the gray, you are now trapped all of us in there. I guarantee that is even if it's a 10% hill, we will not be able to get up that hill. Guarantee it. I've lived there for 10 years. I've been through every ice storm, every cold night where it's rained the day before, where it's humidity, it's just a small amount of ice, where there's snow, and then the snow melts and it gets really cold the next day. We cannot get out. The only way we've been able to get out is up at the top. And when you get to the very top where the green meets the gray up there, that is High Street and Highlands Drive. There's a stoplight there. I have to get out there and I got to push my car a little bit more, and it's not much of a grade. I have to push it a little bit more just to get onto Highlands Drive from High Street. Now you want to put, and that's, you said a 5% grade. Now you want to put, I drive by that hill every day. I would be surprised if it's only a 10%. When they said approximately 10%, I just about guarantee it's more than 10%. If you go down and I don't know if everybody's driven down and seen that hill, it'd be a very good thing to go do before you vote on this, because we're not getting up that hill on a cold, snowy morning or icy morning. We are trapped. Plain and simple. Can't say it any more than that. Just safety issue. You want safety? Keep the Highlands the way it is right now, and none of the kids are going to be threatened right there. It's just plain simple case. Thank you, Mike, for all the things that he said. Why they want this road gone? It helps the developer. They're going to be able to sell the homes more. Basically, in doing that, the West Highlands get screwed. That's just the way it is. And if you want safety, if you want kids to be able to be safe and not as much traffic, don't cut off High Street. Let's see. Microsoft, several times, it's amazing, that they go, you know what, we had Microsoft there, but since they've gone, now we can do this. Well, what I heard was, well, you know what, we had an agreement with Microsoft to build this house. So we still have that, we should have, because we had that agreement beforehand, well, let's keep that agreement. Well, there was other things that we had with Microsoft, but now they're gone, so it's okay to forget about those. But let's not forget about the agreement we had with Microsoft with this other thing over here. Somehow that doesn't disappear, but all the other agreement stuff that we had with Microsoft, hey, that's okay to go, but let's not get rid of this one. Somehow that seems a little hypocritical, where they only point that out for it's a positive to them, as opposed to other things that are negative. They can point that out, say, well, they're gone, so we can now, instead of the street going straight, we can go around, which is probably a good thing to do. I'm not saying that, but we had an agreement with them. Why do we have to mention Microsoft agreement with this? They're gone. They're history. I don't care about the agreement with Microsoft now at that. Has nothing to do with this situation. Let's see. Just want to make sure. I don't know if I mentioned this. I just can't stand the quasi-judicial situation. The developers you guys have been talking to for a long time, I've only heard about this 3-4 weeks ago, and kind of caught up trying to figure out what was going on in the meeting. Now this is the only time you're going to have one more meeting after this. So we can't talk to you, we can't email you, which I respect that, and I won't. But other people, the developers, the city, they've been able to talk to you guys for a while, submit an 80-page or however page thing. And now this is the only time for us to submit to put this. We have really real concerns here. I think it's, I'll totally respect the laws of the council. But I think it's bad that the public gets screwed on this one too, because now we really don't have the chance to email you our concerns after this, to talk to you, to send you information, and to have further discussion one-on-one about this, to talk about details. So anyway, my name is Bob Swanson. I'll be here at the next meeting. I appreciate very much everything you guys do. Please do not vote for this. It's a terrible idea, the street right there being cut off. It's already there. We can do everything we need to do. We don't need that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swanson. And for the record, you and anyone else who wants to communicate with us, you're right, we can't communicate directly, but please feel free to send in letters, emails, whatever, to Lucy, and it will all get on the record. We will all get a copy of it. We received two of them today from folks. So yeah, you can absolutely voice your concerns.
Oh, thank you. I didn't know the last one for this city council. We said we couldn't send that.
Yep, no, you're welcome to do so. Thank you. Ms. Tia.
Hi, I'm Tia Heim with Shelter Holdings, and as you heard, we own the adjacent property to the east of the Plat, and we share a property line on the northern portion of the Plat. And we are supportive of their proposal, but we did want to come tonight to voice an objection to one of the conditions that the city has suggested, and that is condition number 19. That condition states that Park Drive shall be extended westward to connect to Street A. This is problematic for a few reasons, which I'll touch on briefly. One is that Park Drive currently ends at 9th, which is on the opposite side of our property. So if this proposal is being required to extend Park from where it currently terminates to their plat, that would run through our property, which they don't obviously have the permission to do. So that was one point, and I think it was a little bit unclear. The only connections that are actually being made by this plat would be Ellis, which is related to another one of their proposals, and then the High Street, that neither Federal nor Park actually extends all the way to where they currently terminate as a result of this plat. Secondly, there really is no project-related traffic impact that's been identified to justify the proposed connection at Park Street. All of the traffic impact analysis that's been done for all of the recent projects in Issaquah Highlands, including the Polygon TDR proposal, assumed that there was no park connection. So all of the traffic analysis shows that it works without that connection. So there's really no transportation-based reason to provide that connection. And we continue to support a pedestrian and bicycle connection only in that location. That was originally what we had been working with Polygon and the city on until last week we were made aware that the city would like to now put vehicular access there, and it's not really clear why that should be. It's inconsistent with the proposals that we have currently pending on our property. When we went in with and had our pre-application meetings for our proposals, our plat included, we specifically talked about whether Park Drive needed to be extended. And the city expressed a preference that it not be extended for vehicular travel, but only for pedestrian and bike connection. So that's what we've been going with. That's what we think makes sense. We think it's a little bit odd to come up with this last-minute change in position without any traffic analysis to justify it. We hear so much in Issaquah Highlands about how everything should be pedestrian-oriented, and the pedestrian and bike connections are so important and so needed. So this one just seems very out of place. The other thing that I think you need to think about is we did hear from staff last week on our plat that they now would like a 52-foot right-of-way running through our property for Park Drive. So let's think about how's that going to connect. You've got a 52-foot right-of-way coming down, connecting into a 20-foot Woonerf that has houses tight up against it. It just doesn't make a lot of sense as to why you would design it that way, particularly when Park Drive is sort of the main thoroughfare coming down out of the major part of the Highlands. I mean, that's what everybody exits, and then you'd come on, it would sort of feel the same, and you'd come onto our property, and then all of a sudden you're kind of in someone's backyard. It just is an odd configuration. The other thing to think about is unless and until Park Drive extends across our property, which would happen in connection with development of our property, that little Woonerf is going to function as a dead end or a cul-de-sac or something. And as the staff report points out, that's not encouraged within the Highlands. Lastly, last night the city adopted new zoning for Issaquah Highlands, and it designated our property as a very dense commercial development. That's what is required on that property. So if our vested projects aren't allowed to move forward, you're talking about having big office buildings right there. So why would you put a Woonerf connection to a single-family neighborhood that goes right into a property that's going to have a big office building on it? Again, it just isn't making sense. So our conclusion and our ask of you is to take a closer look at it and suggest that condition be revised to require just a pedestrian and bicycle connection only at the Park Drive location. And since there's no transportation analysis that's dictating that needs to be provided, I think it's totally within UVDC's scope to opine on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tia. Appreciate it. Narendra.
Thank you all, and thanks for opportunity to speak. Thank you for council to listening in. And I do agree with my neighbors on a full kind of 100% or more than 100%, where I requesting this proposal because this is not fair to the West Highland community. And I'll give my rationale why it is not. The first rationale came to me as soon as I heard that this is to just inflate the housing price for those better view looking homes. And just if that's the main condition, if there is a road behind it, it's going to create a less problem, less price for them. There's a vehicle traffic, and people consider, when I was looking to buy a house, I was always say, is there a road behind my house? Second thing is, proposed street is not going to be same as what the high street is. I walked down that path, as Bob mentioned, last 4.5 years. Drive, walk with my kids. I have 2 kids. Since this new street came up, which is a gray street opposite to face safe way to come down there, I take a bus. I thought, let me start walking and see how it looks. It is not flat. It is steep. It is as steep as the Discovery Drive. And High Street used to have good connection to West Highland. Now you have to take 2 turns, like 3 turns from a park and ride, come inside a community, this proposed road, and then take another right, and then take another left, and then take a right. It is slopey and windy. It's not going to be safe during the icy conditions. What will happen is people stop driving through the community to go to the other side. They will start using a Discovery Drive, which is itself is just narrow. I always get scared when I come down from inside and outside. You can't see the road because it's a little hilly. If you're coming from the community, you can't see if there's a car coming up or not. There's upcoming school that will increase the traffic. I don't know how it will play out with respect to the proposed street. Take a case of delivery trucks standing on the proposed street in a parallel parking scenario. They will not go and find an open spot right in the 5 blocks away. They will park middle of the road. What will happen when you want to go out? Let's say proposed community was closed community. Like, let's assume Microsoft was still there. They would not be crossing the road the way we have opening. That's the reason why we had that road. With proposed change, there are almost, kind of, as I mentioned, twists and turns. As safety is another concern, like, let's say if there's a park we build, there will be people kind of coming on the proposed street. There will be opposite direction parking. In West Highland, we have that problem. People park opposite direction in a car, and it's really, really hard. You never know when somebody comes out. And now we are talking about whole West Highland community going through the building of all 73 houses. And connection to 9th Street, which will be much more congested now, going to the house. It will have the new community traffic as well as the West Highland community traffic going to the 9th Street. So it will be really traffic. So in and all, I think this proposal is not fair to the West Highland residents. I feel that changing a road to the walk path will increase the price of the house and road views. My humble request is to reject this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Is it Sung Han? Did I get that right? There's Sung Han here? I think he left for the day. Oh, he left. Okay. Not here. Okay. All right. Is there anybody else that would like to speak? That's the last one on the list right now. So is there anybody else that would like to speak? Ms. Marsh.
Hi, I'm Connie Marsh. I actually live over on Squawk Mountain, so I don't live near here, but I'm always interested when something comes up that says it's going to be a park, because I try to look at the city holistically. And I'm trying to figure out how this fits into the parks system altogether. And because I can't understand what it's going to be, and I don't want a 23-foot wide asphalt thing, I think I'm going to ask for a condition that this park as a public amenity be brought into the community and have a public hearing on it before it is approved, when the details are done. And so if you would add that condition, then the community at large could understand the details and say what they like and don't like about it. So that would be suggestion number 1 without asking for details. I did just look up the Lakeside Development Agreement, and there is a variation of height between 84 feet down to 48 feet for those development areas, with the taller ones, I'm going to say at the top, because I'm directionally challenged, and the shorter ones as you go down. It would be good on the plans to actually show the terrain, because you don't get to see the grades to try to understand what is happening. And then if Lakeside is going to change the terrain, what their expected terrain is going to be for the future, because they're going to fill. And so it's very, very hard to understand what it's going to look like with this presentation. And then my typical topic, again, is the trees. We now, in our comprehensive plan, have language indicating that we are going to try to add trees to the hills instead of take them away. And I'm afraid that we're going to get the same sort of housing looking like it's on the edge of a slope effect that we have for the rest of that line of Issaquah Highlands. And I noticed in the comprehensive plan language that was presented, that language was not presented for anybody's information. So the council has made a decision that they want the trees. And so the language provided is basically saying, you might have trees. They say shrubbery or possibly trees. And I disagree with that. I think peekaboo views and a consideration of what it looks like from the valley and across the hill should be included in this language too. And then in listening to the people who live nearby, this does seem like an awfully straight road to have a lot of people driving through potentially at speed. And I am wondering whether it could have, dare I say a roundabout, some sort of traffic calming through it so we aren't creating another Bush Street from downtown, or jog it a little bit to force people to go slow. This whole area was graded like crazy when they made it. So is it possible to change the slope so that it is more consistent throughout the road instead of having a 10 or 11% grade in one spot and having it flat in another spot too? It does get icy up there and people do have a hard time getting in and out. So it seems like there are some ways to get around that. Now, as for whether the road should be moved, I think it's an awesome idea for the rest of the community that has the potential to impact one segment of the community. So I would listen to their voices, but I still support this idea of an amazing community space as long as it goes back to the community so they can approve it. Thanks.
Thank you, Connie. Anybody else like to speak? Mr. Kapler?
David Kapler. I'm kind of late to the party on this one, and I've been kind of doing everything else today since 5 o'clock this morning, so excuse the dress and the mixed up mind. You have a very, very difficult issue here, I think. Do we really want the Green Road being an area that tries to replace the function that High Street does now? All those driveways, all those cars, all those kids, but at the same time, trying to have something, a park corridor where High Street is now has got a lot going for it as well. As a taxpayer in Issaquah, I appreciate all the contributions to our park system that the residents of the Highlands make, and the private parks that they have and are really part of our city. This, again, is going to be part of our city, and if it happens, I would really encourage that serious discussion be and advice with our park department as to how this could be best managed over time, because even if it continues to be owned privately by the homeowners association, it is a citywide amenity, hopefully, and I think the city could be trying hard, and it seems to be working, to get the city park department more involved in what happens in our city on things like this. And I think there's more willingness. They now have 2 park planners instead of 1. There's more willingness on parks and interest in parks to be involved, and I would hope you and they would be included more. You have a very interesting project, but you got a lot of things with traffic, and we're also running on old traffic studies. I believe we do not have all of our traffic studies, and I'm sure and how much, if we get the higher density to the east, how much traffic that's going to generate is really got to be figured into the traffic studies for the future. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Kapler. All right, I will ask one last time if there's anybody else that would like to speak tonight. We will be continuing the public comment section through to the next meeting. But tonight, is there anybody else that would like to speak? I will caution you that we're going to have a discussion based on what we've heard tonight, and there will not be another opportunity to stand up tonight to speak, unless I suppose there's a specific direct question we have for somebody, but I just want to throw that out, so this is your last chance. Anyone? Okay, so we will continue the public comment section. We're closing this or tabling it at 9:06 p.m. and moving it to the next meeting. Lucy, did you have, it looked like you might have some comments before we get into our discussion?
No, I'm just here
You're just here to answer,
support your
okay.
discussion.
All right, well, I know I have lots of things to say, shocking. But I'd like to open it up. First of all, thank you very much for your comments. We appreciate people voicing their concerns and their thoughts, and we hear you. So let me start with that. So, Commission, thoughts, questions, concerns?
I guess, my primary concern, I do like the idea of the additional amenities. From that perspective, vacating the street is a positive. I don't like the idea personally of having an asphalt trail, if you will. I don't think aesthetically that's necessarily the way to go. I've got lots of questions. I think we've heard from the applicant that it's going to be nice, it's going to look nice. I know that IHCA, they're acting on behalf of the community, so you would assume that it's going to be good for the community. But obviously, there's a strong contingent that's opposed to vacating that street. I would like to hear from the applicant in terms of were other thoughts given to using the existing street and somehow incorporating, a development in that space without the new street, and maybe just addressing some of the concerns of that community. I guess unfortunately for some, we're in a position where we have to, kind of act on behalf of the greater good, and that's not always great for everyone. But I still think it's important to address some of the issues and let us hear, what your thinking is.
I tend to agree with that. When I first saw this, my impression was going to be some sort of concrete pathway. I didn't realize it was going to be just asphalt, just a continuation of what's already there. So, from the standpoint of when I think of a plaza or whatever it's been described as, I think of, flowing concrete with nice fixtures and different things for people to play on. And if it's literally just, scraping away part of the road and putting some stuff next to it, I wouldn't think that would be very aesthetically pleasing for the community.
Thank you. Scott, do you have anything?
Yeah, just hearing public comment this evening, it sounds like there's quite a few concerns and possibly some open questions and action items that the city needs to take forward and have some further discussion on, and then in turn bring that information back to us so that we are well educated and understand not only the city's stance, but the community stance as well as Shelter Holdings stance.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is of priority before we go too deep into the weeds.
Okay. Scott, do you have anything?
So I just heard a lot of comments about the ice and the conditions in the wintertime, so I think I'd like to hear more about that, and then maybe the concerns of the community had about blocking people in during those conditions. So I think that we should learn a lot more about that so we know exactly what we're getting into.
Okay. Thank you. All right, so where do I start?
Let me get a new page.
Okay, so for those of you that don't know me, you will know that, or you will maybe learn that I take these comments very seriously. We have had many proposals and permit applications and so forth over the however many years I've been here, 18, 17 years I've been on this commission, where it's going to adversely affect somebody more than others, and where it will benefit some more than others, and I do take that seriously. I also, to Jim's point, look at the greater good of the community, and that's what I've been tasked to do on this commission. I have not made up my mind yet on where I think this should go, because I think there's a lot of unanswered questions. But I will make a few general statements that sort of relate back to what I just prefaced this with, and that is, you know, by buying into a community in Issaquah Highlands, it doesn't give you the sort of perpetual right to have exactly what you had when you moved in, unfortunately. I know this firsthand. I'm in my second home here, and like I said, we have 5 family homes here, and a lot of things have changed since we moved in 98. As an example, and I would use this as a parallel, Black Nugget Road was the way in and out of the Highlands. My house is directly behind Black Nugget Road. It would be immensely more convenient for me to go in and out of Black Nugget Road, but I don't get to do that. I get to drive through a bunch of neighborhoods to get to Highlands Drive, to 9th, and eventually to the freeway. And all I'm saying is that's just a reality for us, that some of that stuff happens. I've had people say, hey, how can you build houses on this side of the street? We bought a house on the other side of the street, and now we're going to lose our view. Well, we should have known that things change around here and that houses are going to be built on both sides of the street, not just the one that you live on. So I say that not to criticize or negate anybody's thoughts. That's how this community has been built over the years. And for better or worse, some of those things have to happen. With respect to things like the hills, you know, there are a lot of hills in this neighborhood. There are plenty of hills that people can't get up and down. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but it's a reality again. Katsura, where my house is off of, that is unmanageable. Park Drive is unmanageable for many cars when we have those instances of snow and ice and rain. So that's not unique. I think we need to continue to rely on, first of all, good design, and secondly, maintenance of those roads during those conditions, because it's not unique to Ellis Drive or Discovery or any other one street in this community. So I just want to make sure that we're, you know, that the city services are well aware of anything that might happen here, and take that into consideration. There were a couple comments with respect to inflated housing prices. Got news for you folks. All the houses have inflated prices right now. I would think that the difference between the cost of a house, and this is just my opinion, which really means nothing, but I'll say it anyway. The cost of a house, whether there's a road behind it and a view past it, or an amenity like this behind it and a view past it, would be negligible. We're seeing houses right now selling directly across from the utilities and facilities of Swedish Hospital, selling in excess of $1.5 million. To me, probably not what I would want to have in my backyard, but houses are selling. Bless you, Lucy.
Excuse me.
So we can't take into consideration housing prices when it comes to these kinds of decisions. It's not within our purview. I recognize it and understand it, but we've had this happen a number of times, come up in places where adjacent properties are building things, and it does change potentially the value of homes either up or down. But that's not within our purview. We can't really address that necessarily. Let's see. I heard a couple people say it's not fair. You're right, it's not fair. Things suck sometimes. And you may be absolutely right, and we may go that direction. But I don't think this is about what's fair and not fair. I think about what's right for the overall community and the project. When people have a view that the developer is getting a bunch of benefit or consideration that they don't deserve, I don't know who decides who deserves what or not, but that, I understand that because it directly affects you, and that's a serious thing. But I think we need to look at, you know, not whether somebody deserves something, but whether or not they're entitled through the guidelines, through their agreements, through our agreement and the development agreement, if they're entitled to do what it is we're talking about. So that brings me to some of my questions. I happen to agree with a lot of you, and including Connie and David, about the park piece. When I heard about the asphalt, that's sort of where I was getting to early on before we ever got to public comment, is what does this thing really look like? I don't want to show up one day and see that it's just a strip of grass or just a strip of asphalt or just a swale in there because, we could dig a hole and put concrete in it. I want to know what this really is, and so who's giving their input on it, and how do we get there? I'm going to ask the question, can the development occur without that street being converted, without High Street being converted? I don't know the answer to that. I haven't been able to tell. If so, what would that take? Is it not physically possible for it to happen and for them to build 73 homes on the proper size lots? Or can it actually happen? So maybe there's a compromise there.
3 options forward.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe there's an opportunity there. So I need some clarification too, maybe not tonight, but in general, on Ellis, Park, Federal, and Discovery. Realistically, what do those look like as access points to and from both West Highlands Park and Westridge North, and East, and whatever else is built around there, as well as the shelter property? I think that's, Tia made a very good point that if Park Drive is running into a Woonerf, it's kind of an interesting situation we've got there, and so I want to understand that better. And then I would say to those of you that, if we get to the point where High Street goes away as a drive, if you will, for vehicles, sometimes we have to adjust our plans. So you go down 9th and you turn on Federal or Ellis or Discovery instead of going down High Street. I know it's less convenient, but it will become as or more convenient if you're going out the other direction, or whatever's being built at Shelter, it might be more convenient to go there. We don't know. Just because it exists today doesn't mean it has to exist tomorrow. I've seen many things go away that I would have liked to see stay, and sometimes it's for the better. So I know it's a lot, but we're not getting a lot of time to discuss this or address it. So I thought I'd throw all of those things out there and say that, again, I have not made my decision on how I would go on this yet, but I look forward to hearing responses tonight or next meeting.
Yeah, you're not supposed to make decisions tonight, so that's
What's that?
great. You're not supposed to make decisions tonight, so
No,
that's
I know.
great.
Noah, I know.
So that's great.
I'm saying I'm not sure I'm going to hear it tonight or next meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that this is exactly why we do this, is you guys come up with some things that we expect and some things we don't expect, and that's why we want time in between to research, go talk to other departments, get answers, ponder questions that were raised, and try and give you thoughtful information and revisions if appropriate.
Thank you. Any other comments? Anybody want to rebut mine?
You've covered them all well, so thank you.
Okay, all right then. So at this time, we will move on to the next agenda item. Lucy, unless you have more on this?
No, I was just going to, I had just had a couple of sort of housekeeping items I was going to mention.
Okay, for the item for other business?
Yes.
Okay, and I have something too.
Okay.
A couple of questions for you.
Okay.
And actually, if the Westridge folks could stick around, I might need an answer from you on this. Can I start?
Yeah.
Okay, so thinking back to Westridge South, I've walked that a number of times now, and I'm really quite perplexed and somewhat disappointed at the trail on the very back side, how close it is to each of the homes and the fences, but also just the standard of that trail is different than I thought it was going to be, and I don't know why. I don't know if that was just me being me, but I'm curious about that. But equally important, or maybe more so for me, is we talked about, I suggested a tree-lined entry down that road, and I don't know if it's just the timing of things. There's nothing there now. Is that going to be happening? It is.
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm going to leave the trail for now. We actually have an email exchange going on about the trail, so I don't have all the answers
Okay.
for you. But in terms of the entry road, it doesn't have all of its landscape installed. The one thing that did happen that we had not anticipated during the platting process, we had anticipated a very straight street with parking along it, and when we got to construction, the mammoth vault that's there that we call the flow splitter relies on having an open grid cover, and we did not know that it could not function without that. And so the road had to kind of wow around it rather than be straight. But I do think that there are some traffic calming opportunities. But yes, the street trees are planned and approved as part of the landscape permit. I'm looking at Valerie because Valerie reviewed it for me. Valerie's one of our new planners who will be
great. Hi, Valerie.
here for the next meeting.
Great, so, so street trees are
Yes.
one thing, but, I mean, I had suggested, and by no means am I the authority, but I was suggesting something more grand as a beautifully street tree-lined entry that would have maybe some sort of canopy or something from a beauty standpoint that would be different and unique from what we see all over the rest of the community.
Right.
Is that the plan?
I don't remember what the tree is off the top of my head,
That is the
but
plan. Thank you, Sarah. Okay, great, thank you. I think, let me see if there was anything else I had for new business. I think that was the last thing for me,
okay.
thankfully for all of you.
So the two things I wanted to mention was, last night was at the council, both of the development agreements that we met so many times with you last year were back for adoption. The replacement regulations for Issaquah Highlands were adopted. The replacement regulations for Talus were remanded related to parcel 9, which is the parcel that slid. And there's a discussion about whether it should be single family or multifamily. So that will go back to PPC I don't know whether the hearing will be at PPC or at council, but it will go back for some kind of meeting at PPC and then back to the council for a decision. And then our understanding is that would be the point at which the Talus development agreement would be terminated and the replacement regulations adopted. And there's a commitment to finish that by July 16th, although we think that that will be done sooner than that.
Thanks for that update.
So the other thing, because I'm the lead on this permit, I didn't want to do 2 presentations plus the 2 for last night. So, but I am making a commitment that at the next UVDC meeting, when other permits we have a series of 4 to 5 permits that are coming up this year. The next one is the Westridge North Townhomes, which Valerie is the lead for. I will bring you, as I typically do each year, sort of an update on the status of permits that we're expecting, both administrative and not administrative, ones that would be coming to you. As many of you know, I think I just marked myself. As many of you know, we had thought that the UVDC, the UVDC would terminate January 1 with the new appointments. But that was, when we were talking to you last year, that was predicated on the termination of the development agreements and the adoption of the replacement regulations in December. And that didn't happen. Issaquah Highlands, as I said, was last night, which means that the whole process began of selecting for another round of commissioners. I would say that the people who apply, it was not a robust application process for our commission. And because there are these permits and there is a certain level of expertise among you commissioners, that we anticipate now that we would have another year of the commission and possibly terminate next year, assuming that those permits have been processed. So that's kind of the status of the commission right now.
We have interviews tomorrow.
We have 1 interview tomorrow, and then the application process for anyone who's interested is still open. It's been extended, which means that instead of the typical appointments being made by May 1st or by April 30th, so that commission positions and board positions start May 1st, it will be June 1st this year.
All right, and the next meeting's still scheduled for April 3rd, correct?
Yes.
All right. Any comments or thoughts, questions?
Nope.
Anything else?
Someone left a nice pen up here.
Okay, well then, I will go ahead and close the meeting at 9:26 PM. Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
all the hard work, Lucy and applicant and everyone else.
Thank you.